Hey everyone, Romeo here, a fellow Spanish language learner. In this video, I'm going to give you the shockingly simple truth about what it actually means to learn Spanish. Because once you strip away all the methods, apps, opinions, and internet debates, learning Spanish comes down to four things. That's it, four things. First, you have to learn a word or phrase. Second, you have to learn how that word or phrase connects to other words or phrases. Third, you have to recognize those words and phrases when you see them or hear them. And fourth, you have to recall those words and phrases when you want to say them yourself. That's the whole game. Now, people can argue about methods all day. They can argue about comprehensible input, grammar books, apps, flashcards, tutors, immersion, podcasts, YouTube, Netflix, whatever. But no matter what method you use, it still has to solve those four problems. You have to learn what words and phrases mean. You have to understand how they connect. You have to recognize them when Spanish comes at you, and you have to recall them when you want to speak. If your method does not help you do all four, then it's incomplete. Not necessarily useless, but incomplete. Let me give you a simple example. If I say, Hola, me llamo Romeo y me gusta hablar español, that may mean absolutely nothing to you at first. It just sounds like a string of Spanish words. But once you learn the meaning, now you know, hello, my name is Romeo and I like to speak Spanish. That's step one. You learn the words and the phrase. But that's not enough. You also need to understand how the sentence is built. Me llamo Romeo, that's how you say, my name is Romeo. Me gusta hablar español, that's how you say, I like to speak Spanish. Now you're not just memorizing sounds, you're starting to understand how the pieces connect. That's step two. Then if you hear someone else say, Hola, me llamo Carlos, you can recognize it. You know what's happening. That's step three. And if someone asks you your name and you can say, Me llamo Romeo, now you can recall it. That's step four. And that is what learning Spanish is. It's not magic. It's not a secret. It's just expanding that process over and over again. For example, once you know hola, you can learn other greetings. You can say, ¿Qué tal? Me llamo Romeo. Once you know me gusta hablar español, you can swap out the verb. Me gusta caminar. I like to walk. Me gusta estudiar. I like to study. Me gusta viajar. I like to travel. Once you know how to say español, you can say other languages. Me gusta hablar francés. I like to speak French. Me gusta hablar inglés. I like to speak English. Then you can learn how to make it negative. No me gusta hablar. I don't like to speak. Then you can learn how to talk about what you want. Quiero hablar español. I want to speak Spanish. Then what you're going to do, voy a hablar español. I'm going to speak Spanish. Spanish is just expansion, not reinvention. Now, here's the part most people miss. Once you understand the basics really well, Spanish stops being about learning a language and it becomes about expanding into new domains. Let's say you can already say I want, or I like, or I need, I'm going to, or I did. And you understand how to connect those into sentences. At that point, structure is already doing the heavy lifting. Everything else is just vocabulary inside that structure. So if you want to function in a medical environment, you don't relearn Spanish, you add medical terms. I have pain. I need medicine. The patient is stable. Same structure, different domain. If you want to talk to your kids about animals, the lion is big. The monkey is eating. Look at the elephant. Same structure, different domain. If you work in the food industry, I need the order. The table is ready. We are out of chicken. Same structure, different domain. Spanish doesn't reset every time you enter a new situation. It expands. And this is where people get stuck. They think, I don't know enough Spanish yet. When the real issue is they don't know enough vocabulary for that domain. If your structure is weak, you need to reinforce the basics. But if your structure is solid, you don't need a new method. You don't need a new course. You don't need to start over. You just need to expand. And expansion follows the same four steps. You learn the new words, you see how they connect, you recognize them, and you practice recalling them. Same process, new context. This is exactly why I recommend a structured approach. Not because structure is exciting, but because it forces you to train all four steps. You learn words and phrases, you learn how the language connects, you recognize it through reading and listening, and you recall it through translation and speaking drills. That is the logic behind the 1 Year to Fluency Tracker. The tracker is not just a random list of Spanish tasks. It is built around the idea that you need a complete system. You need structure, you need input, you need vocabulary review, you need listening, you need reading, and you need output. Because if the goal is conversational Spanish, then eventually you have to train conversation related skills. You cannot skip recall and then wonder why you cannot speak. That would be like watching workout videos and wondering why you're not stronger. At some point, you have to lift. Spanish works the same way. At some point, you have to produce the language. So, the point of this video is simple. Learning Spanish is not complicated, but it does require completeness. You have to learn the language. You have to understand how it works. You have to recognize it, and you have to recall it. Any method that helps you do all four is useful. Any method that skips one of the four is limited. And if your goal is to speak Spanish, recall cannot be optional. Because if you want to speak Spanish, eventually you have to practice saying Spanish. There is no way around that. And from there, learning Spanish is just building on those 4 steps over and over and over again, one piece at a time, over time. So if this video gave you clarity on what it actually means to learn Spanish, give this video a like. And if you want to learn specifically what resources you should use to use Spanish, be sure to check out this video here. And until the next video, good luck on your journey to building more functional, usable Spanish. Peace.